My name is Jenn Beatty, and to me, when is now means tomorrow starts today, and we are the authors of our stories.
Hello, everyone. Hello. I'm doing my happy dance because literally this whole conversation that I am having with my next guest, Jenn Beatty, soon to be Dr. Jenn Beatty, like literally made me want to jump up and run around my office a couple times. I'm super excited to introduce you to her. She is a researcher. She's a thought leader. She's a fellow, a UPenn Mapster, my Mapster sister. She's brilliant and all around a good person, and she is an absolute delight. And the research she's doing is bananas. So on this conversation, you're going to hear a lot of stuff. And it's really, really good. And we get really, really vulnerable. But we cover stuff like the nuance and the nature of objectivity. We talk about, I hate that term, soft skills, and why it's a terrible term. Jenn's research, it's not only on implicit bias, but she's correcting for implicit bias. So she's measuring for it, and then she's correcting for it. We talk about the freedom of like living in the when is now. And I can't say anything else. I just got to let you get into it. I think you're going to love it. I hope it makes you do the happy dance. All right, enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to When Is Now podcast. I'm Capella. Thank you for coming. Today we have Jenn Beatty. Okay, Jenn Beatty, I'm super excited about this. What's up, girl?
Oh my gosh, I am so excited to be here.
All right. So it is a tradition in our podcast that we start off by asking the guests to tell us their personal interpretation of when is now.
Perfect. All right. I'll kick it off. So my name is Jenn Beatty, and to me, when is now means tomorrow starts today, and we are the authors of our stories.
I like that. That sounds like a title. Jared, can we not jot that down, please? Yeah, yes. Tomorrow starts today. Did you make that up, or should we be citing somebody, girl?
That's a great question. I feel like I want to give appropriate citations always, but I feel like I've been saying it now for years that the citation might have gotten lost. I'm sure it was inspired by Oprah or Brene Brown or some big name. But just this notion that we're always putting off tomorrow what we could be doing today, because it can feel so scary or overwhelming, or, procrastination and avoidance is so common. And as humans, we're so good at justifying, right? So it's we're sitting there and it's oh, well, I'll feel better tomorrow. Oh, well, when I get up, I'll have this energy. But the interesting thing is, oftentimes what we're putting off isn't big. What feels big is our anxiety. And so if we can take a small bite of it today, then by the time tomorrow gets here, you've already gotten started and it's less daunting.
Jenn Beatty, you do not disappoint. All right. So I just have to put I literally don't want to say one single word, because every single word that I say on air is less words that you can say. And we all need the most words that we can get from you. But I want to say this really quick. When is now came from just that, people have different interpretations. There's the interpretation of when is now meaning be present. Wherever you are, right. Here you are. There's the interpretation do it now, right? And it really came from this idea that I always would see people be in this loop of when. When I graduate, I'll have the answers. When I get to my first job, when I pay off my debt, when I meet my soulmate, when I buy my house, it was always sort of this when and my brother, who was always in perpetual motion, I would hear him say, all right, as soon as we sell this house, we'll be good. And I'll be like, Dale, to be honest, you are going to have 1,000 balls in the air. And by the time you sell that house, you're going to have another ball that you're waiting. There's never a when. It's always now, right?
Yes. What's so powerful about that too, one thing that I do always say is wherever you go, there you also are. And so often the mindset behind putting it off is we think we're going to change in that new thing. We think we're going to be different. We're going to have a bigger capacity. We're going to be smarter, faster, stronger, whatever the adjective is. But the interesting thing is you are actually more constant than you might think. And in the moments where you don't feel as capable, you can actually build this capacity. And as you build that capacity, when you meet that future moment, you won't have lived it out in your head 50 times because you're so present and using what you got right now, because oftentimes it's more than enough, but we psych ourselves out, you know?
I'm literally like want to run around my office right now. You are giving me life. Okay. All right, wait, we got to get to where we're going here because you're doing amazing research. You're doing amazing research, and it's research that people told you couldn't do, right? Isn't it? Didn't people say this wasn't measurable?
Absolutely.
Okay, don't get into it yet. No, we can't. Don't get into it yet. Wait for it.
I love it.
Because listen, I'm telling you, listeners, and I've never told you this in any podcast, you must wait to get this research that she's doing. You've got to hear about it. But first, I want to hear the build up. We got to get the build up. Okay. So girl, you could start when you were 5 years old. You can start when you got your first, no thank you from your PhD program. You can start at your first boyfriend. I don't care where you start. Just give me some,
I love this.
Give us some context, some history of what makes Jenn Beatty, Jenn Beatty.
Oh my goodness.
And
so we got to take
for
it
the
back.
world. Wait, for the world. You know, there's some people you have to call by like their whole name, right? I could never just call her Jen. She's always Jenn Beatty. And she's about to be Dr. Jenn Beatty.
Come on now.
About to be Dr. Jenn Beatty.
Come on.
Okay, but go ahead. I'm putting myself on mute.
We're in it. I love it. So we got to take it back to when I was 10 years old. So I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm a true LA girl, LA native. It's funny though, because I haven't lived there since I moved away to college, but that's a whole other story. But my whole family's there. And so I managed, it's a common thing in LA when you're growing up to do fun, spectacular things that you can only do in LA. And so when I was a kid, like me and my sister, we would be in commercials and we were a part of this agency called The Coloring Book, like all this like fun stuff that you could literally only do probably in LA or New York. So I was used to talking to people. I love talking to people. I love talking to adults. I was always enamored by their wisdom, by their insight. I wanted to know their stories. And so at 10, my sister had just gotten accepted into this prestigious school on the West Side. And I was tagging along for this beach cleanup. And I was like one of the only little siblings there. And they ended up putting me in a group away from my mom and my sister. And I just started talking to this lady. We were hitting it off. And I was telling her all about my life. I was asking her questions, just all these things. It's so funny to think about now because I just imagine myself as 10, like all the precociousness. And at the end of this Santa Monica beach cleanup, she goes, "Is your mom around? I'd love to talk to her." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, Mom, get over here." It turns out she was the headmaster's wife of the entire school. And I had no idea, right? Like I was just chatting her up. And it turned out that was the last year that her and her husband would be at the school. And she said, I've been trying to figure out what legacy I want to leave before I go. And I would love to figure out a way for Jenn to go to the school on a full scholarship in an at capacity grade. I literally was interviewing and had no idea. And so a lot of serendipity, faith, and anything that you could imagine met me in that moment. And the class was at capacity. One of the girls' dads ended up getting a job moving away. They bumped me up off of this wait list of like hundreds of kids. And I was starting at a brand new school on a 98% scholarship as a fifth grader. And the reason I start that story is because there was my life before that moment. And then there was the trajectory that my life began to take at that moment. And there's this really interesting research on confidence in girls and when it begins to change. And before puberty, girls and boys have similar levels of confidence, right? They're outspoken, outgoing, willing to play. But there's something that happens at that puberty age where things begin to change, where you begin to feel more questions in your own body and figuring out what your development means. And for me, that would come very quickly after I started at that school. And so while I was still this outgoing girl, I was also beginning to meet questions, not just within myself, but of race, of class, of gender, of all of these constructs that I didn't even know existed in my mesosystem, right? Like in my surrounding environment. And so I kept up with the acting thing, with the theater thing, and I wanted to just use it as an avenue to express myself, to express my emotions. And I'll never forget the first narrative I heard around this exact topic. I had a beloved theater teacher, but she said something that has almost haunted me in a way to very recently in my adult life. She said, you know, Jen, you're so talented. Your personality is so large, but you have to know the rules before you break them. And Capella, when I tell you, I was a rule follower already, right? Like I was the type A perfectionist child, always wanting to please the teacher. I interpreted what she was saying as I need to learn how the world works before I feel the freedom to express and contribute in the world. And even though she was saying it in a theater context, I applied it to everything. So, okay, if I want to know how to help people in their mind, I have to learn all of psychology. Okay, if I want to know how to act, I need to know Shakespeare, like all the way back. Like I internalized it as not good enough. But there was a small caveat of yet. And it would take a lot of introspection and a lot of really grappling with those questions of like, well, who told you that? And why are you letting this narrative have so much control over your life all these years later? But it was a driving force to a lot of the achievement, really treadmill that I was on. I'm happy to say that changed a lot, especially when I found my way to my current research and what I want to do. And realizing like a lot of our gatekeepers didn't have keys in the first place to the gates that we put ourselves in, and really grappling with some of these things that I took for granted. And so my childhood experience was so formative, but I could also see how it shaped a lot of the narratives that I would have to undo as an adult.
Wow, Jenn Beatty. I didn't know any of that. That's amazing. And it's funny because those that grow up like in the Detroits or the Midwest,
yes.
we should, I mean, how you said you grew up in LA, that's what we imagine. It's always sunny. You guys are acting. You're on the beach cleaning up, and then you meet the headmaster and you get accepted as a prestigious school. Like
it's a
that's
movie,
how we imagine.
Right?
It's a movie in LA and it's a movie, right? Wow. What part of LA did you grow up in?
So I grew up close to South Central LA, right on the border of Inglewood. My grandparents on my dad's side lived in Compton. And then the school I went to was off of Sunset. So 10 miles turned into 90 minutes one way, leaving at 4:35 in the morning just to get there. It was such a formative. I remember my dad like taking me early, and we would be listening to like the Steve Harvey morning show. And I would always know like if we were running late or on time based on like where were we at the letter yet? The strawberry letter? Like where were we? And because that was like my internal clock. I'm like, oh, we're going to be late. And it was so funny because thinking about that experience, for the longest time, I thought it was the best thing that happened to me. And I still hold that, right? Like as a strong part of my narrative. But what I've learned through a lot of my work in psychology and thinking about emotions is thinking about nuance. So something doesn't have to be 100% good or 100% bad. Mm-hmm. Life actually exists in like the in-between, like the little gray area where it's not like a full triumphant story, but it's also not the worst thing that happened to you. And so really grappling and sitting in the, wow, that was really great, or that part wasn't so great, or I didn't know how to navigate that. Because while amazing of an educational opportunity that it was, I was not set up to navigate the socioeconomic, because we're talking about like, not just like wealthy, but like ultra wealthy. We're also talking famous. We're also talking about just a life that I didn't even really know was accessible. Like it seemed unpenetrable, and it really changed what I value, what I think about, what I strive for. I always say it's not lost on me that I've now lived on the East Coast and now the Midwest. Like, I love the United States. Like, I love the differences in geography and people and places and how it forms your identity. And so a lot of times growing up, it felt like the only places in the US were LA and New York, because that's all anyone ever talked about. And now I know that it's like saying, 100%, a good experience is 100% good. No, there's some nuance in between, right? Like, there's some really strong richness, but you have to work to access it, because it's also easy to just stay where you grew up and stay in almost an insular bubble. And not really question anything, but I question everything.
I want to take that good and bad a step further and see what you think about it. Because so if everyone doesn't know, Jenn and I, we'll get into her rich educational experience, but Jenn and I met at Penn. Thank you very much. We're both Mapsters.
Yes, we are.
So I wanted to, even before I was a Mapster, when I was just a business person, I would always say there's no right or wrong. There's only consequences, right? Or there's no good or bad. There's only consequences. And I get a lot of pushback on that, right? But then when it's Mapster, Dr. Prawelski had us reading William James, Shakespeare. And Shakespeare says something very similar. He says there's no good or there's no good or bad thinking makes it so. Something like that.
Yeah.
Right? Good or bad thinking makes it so. So, you talked about a sort of good and bad, and then this scale, and it always kind of bounces around. But I would like to know what you think. Do you want to make a comment on the sort of the way I look at good and bad?
Yeah, no, I love this so much, because it really calls into question this nature of objectivity. And so often, in my, one of my courses, personality psychology, there's this concept of equifinality and multifinality. And it's this idea that like two people can start at the same spot and end up in completely different places, or two people can start at completely different spots and end up at the same place. And so that notion of person and environment, or, okay, this thing is objectively good or this thing is objectively bad, I don't know if I can buy into the simplicity of just good or bad. It's why when we watch a movie, there's nothing more compelling than the quote unquote villain having some nuance and some humanity. And we love that story arc, right? Like, there's nothing better than the hated villain showing us his why. And then he comes around and it's like, oh no, he does this for his family. And it's like, right. And I think it goes back to what I know to be true about us being the authors of our lives. We craft meaning out of things. And so something could happen to me and I make up a story about it, right? I could make it a personalized story where I did something wrong. I could externalize that story and say they did something wrong. I could balance that story and said maybe we were both doing things that we were learning from, but nothing is ever black and white. I say that with the asterisks because I love what you said about consequences. Because I could imagine other scenarios where people are doing harmful things and they are bringing about really damaging, what I might even say morally questionable actions. And there are always consequences for our behaviors. So while we would all love this like magic 8-ball to be like, okay, if I do this, what will it lead to? We don't have that. Mm-hmm. What we have instead is responsibility. So you might not know where that's going to lead to, but you're still responsible for where it leads to because that's life, right? Especially in adulthood, we're responsible for our own actions despite all of the things that led us here.
Okay, so you talked about narrative, and I just have to bring up, because this is like essential to my life, Jenn Beatty, narrative, because there's our narrative about ourselves. There's our narrative about someone else. Yeah. There's someone else's narrative about us. Ooh. And rarely, right, are they the same? Rarely are they the same.
Exactly. And it's like, how do we make sense of that incongruency? Because so often people will spend their whole lives trying to make someone else see them how they see themselves. And it's like, is that wasted effort? Is that worthwhile effort? What is your intention behind trying to line those things up? And if all of those narratives are discongruent, then which is the narrative that matters the most to you?
And which is the narrative that's most true?
Come on.
Because how many times have, so this is a small snippet, and I'm going to share this, a very vulnerable thing for me. I'm going to share it. I'm going to try not to cry. I'm going to share it. I'm going to share it because I'm getting out of it. From 0 to 6 months ago, I never thought I was smart. And I actually thought I was the opposite word. Right?
Oh my gosh.
I just never did. Like I knew I had street sense, I had common sense, and I knew people liked me, and I knew I worked hard. So those 4 things can get you really far in life.
For sure.
But as far as book smart, I would say it, like, I'm not the one. Like I went to Osborne. I went to Detroit Public Schools my whole life. I didn't get, when I wanted to go to Michigan, I didn't get into Michigan. I went to a community college. I went to the community college. Then I went to Michigan. Right. So I always got what I wanted, but it was just so many extra steps. I had to work extra hard. Right. Same thing with Penn. I knew I wanted to be in Penn, didn't get into Penn. I don't know if you know that. I applied to the 16th cohort, didn't get in.
I didn't know that.
And I emailed him right away. I said, didn't get in this time. That's all right. I'm in the film industry. I eat rejection for breakfast. I will be back next year. And he was like, I look forward to it. And, and then the funny thing is, that was the first email I got from Dr. Pawelski saying, I'm sorry, there's great competition. We couldn't accept you this year. And then one of the last emails I got from Dr. Pawelski was the other day he personally asked me to be his assistant instructor.
Come on.
How about that for a journey?
Come on.
So I say all this about narrative.
Yes.
But I say all this about narrative because that's what I always tell myself. Like, you're not smart, but you're smart enough to know these things. You're smart enough to work hard. You're smart enough to have common sense, street sense. You treat people well, blah, blah, blah. But then other people look at me and they think I'm a genius. and I'm like trying to convince people, no. But I just, that came up because you said all these different narratives and which is important, but then which is true. Or what's
See,
true?
There's so much richness in this story because like I was talking to some university students. I'm in this very privileged position. I am an assistant instruction at WashU for a course called The Psychology of Black Women. 70 students, 98% of them are Black women. So it's almost shocking because I've literally never been in this environment, right? And I've been in education now, however many years. And one of them was saying something very similar to what you were saying. And me, being the person I am, dug in with a question because I'm not the kind of person to just affirm because I know that's short-lived, right? If you only have me hyping you up, saying, no, you're brilliant, no, you're this. When you go home late at night, you're like, well, Jenn thinks that. And I love Jenn, but that's not doing enough for me because nothing has actually changed cognitively. And she said something so interesting because the question that we were discussing was, when were you first exposed to research? She said, well, I don't do research. I'm not a PhD student. I don't know. And I asked her, I said, well, what do you think research is? She said, oh, okay. That's a good question. Isn't it just like the accumulation of knowledge and things like that? I'm like, yep. And think about like the scientific method. When did you start learning about the scientific method? And she was like, oh, like third grade. I'm like, girl, you see what I'm saying? And so when I heard what you were sharing, my first question is, well, how are we defining intelligence? Mm-hmm. What is our working definition of smart? Because I can tell you, this might shock some people, but I have had a very, very interesting experience with something that I now pride myself in my ability to do, which was statistics and math. All throughout my career, especially in middle school, high school, all these things, the school I went to had all of these advanced courses, but everyone did them. So it wasn't the norm to be in the regular math class. You needed to be in the honors math class because that's where everyone else was. And when I would try to go in those classes, they would have me in and then give it about a few weeks, a few months, they'd pull my parents in and say, we recommend Jenn for remedial math. She's not keeping up with the coursework. We notice that she has to work very hard to grasp basic concepts. And so I carried that with me all throughout, scoring low on these standardized tests, scoring very low, like up until the GRE, right? And even when I would get in these rooms or get these interviews, all these things, people had one question. How do you explain this math score? And what I did, people usually don't even realize this, but I now have taken advanced statistics courses, gotten like as high of a grade as you can get in them. And I taught myself how to code. Like I taught myself how to code and how to analyze my own data because I never wanted to be in a position where I couldn't answer my own questions. I just wasn't interested in that. I'm like, if I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to do it. And there wasn't someone there to necessarily teach me. I self-taught this stuff after MAP. In the 2 years before I applied, I was self-teaching myself, not just the statistical programming, but what all those tests meant. What was I actually trying to do? So by the time I started my PhD program, it was a reinforcement because I learned something about myself. I'm not dumb. I'm not slow. Complex problems I need to process multiple times, period. And when I said that to other intellectuals or other people who I looked up to, they were like, oh yeah, me too. Oh yeah, that makes sense. And I'm like, where were y'all at my 18-year-old AP stats class when my teacher was telling me I wasn't good enough. And then we think about all of the stereotypes with people of color and like all of these things that were impacting my sense of self. But the most interesting thing about narratives and narrative accuracy is we still have a negativity bias. And so there is something in us that thinks the more negative view is the more accurate one. And I fight my entire life to make sure that people know just because it's negative doesn't mean it's true. Just because it's cynical doesn't make it more true. Just because someone's apathetic doesn't make them more of an intellect. In fact, I look at that and go, man, that's a lot of jaded waters to wade through, right? Like, man, where's the hope and the optimism? Because I love the work I do, but I sit on 30 PhD rejections to be where I am. And so I actually think that when people are, let's just say, naturally gifted, where they don't have to work as hard, the narrative that actually tells them is I can get by in life just skating. My narrative has never been that. My narrative has been, let me tell you something, girl, you better work twice as hard, get half as right. Like, we know this in our society, but let me tell you something, it has served me well because I don't shy away from complicated, complex problems. I say this is just requires a little bit more hard work, but I got that in the tank. So let's, go until the wheels fall out and then give some more.
Thank you, Jenn Beatty. Thank you. All right. So this is, and I will answer your one question. I'll answer.
Yes. Please.
This is how I would define intelligence. Normal me. Like if you would ask me this.
Yeah.
7 months ago. Because I'm telling you, the last 6 months, I'm owning it. There's no way you're going to have two masters, a master's of applied positive psychology. I mean, the premier program in the world.
Come on.
From an Ivy League institution. I'm finishing a master's of philosophy and organizational dynamics. So I've rejected this. I've accepted my brilliance. But if you would ask me 7 months ago, if I were what I would define as intelligence or someone that was smart, this is honestly what I would tell you. Someone that can point out Idaho on a map. Like, I don't know geography. Like, to me, you know what I mean?
Neither do I. Oh, that's so interesting.
But that's what I would, sort of book smarts, like, because we've always been told, like, empathy, compassion, trust, transformational leadership. Those are soft skills. What does that say inherently? Soft skills. Those are women's skills. Those are not tangible skills. Those are not marketable skills. But now soft skills are all the rage, and I'm full of them.
Yes. It's so interesting. I have to comment here too, because it's so interesting that you said that's how I would define it, which is basically like one of the facets that you feel like you don't have. But what's so interesting and what has been my journey through this similar topic is this notion of like owning what I don't know, which you do so beautifully, but not seeing it as like, oh, someone's going to think less of me because I don't know this. Because the people who I look up to are very clear about what they know and what they don't know. So even if someone asks me a question about my like center of expertise, and I know there's not enough data to really talk about it confidently, I can be like, our body of knowledge ends here. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. And I trust those people more because I don't want to be sold something that I don't know, like that isn't true. I don't like deception. I don't like lies. I don't like that kind of stuff. And I actually think it's a mark of incredible intelligence and wisdom and humility to be like, I don't know that.
Don't know where Idaho is. I've learned it's on the West Coast.
Okay.
It's on the West Coast. I thought it was in the Midwest.
I thought it was in the Midwest if you said it.
I thought it was Midwest too. No, but I think it's in the Pacific time zone.
We apologize to all those people viewing from Idaho. We love you guys.
Yes. No, I heard it's beautiful. I was supposed to go to Boise a couple times. It's so hot. It's so beautiful. I just have not had a chance to go. All right. We've got to talk about, can we start with your 30 PhD rejections, which is always God's protection.
Come on. So I love that we're starting there because here's the truth. What I've learned in just the application process to the PhD, it is different than any other application process I've been through, jobs, terminal master's degrees, because the PhD, particularly in psychology, so that's, if someone's getting a PhD in something else, or I'm not necessarily talking about those, but it really is mostly an apprenticeship model. So you're not really applying to the school as much as you are applying to work with a specific research mentor for 5 years, fully funded, right? I'm not talking about PsyDs. I'm talking about a PhD in psychology. And so it is as much of a matching process as you can imagine. And so it's not just about how impressive you are as a candidate. Everyone's impressive. It's about the alignment of what you want to study with the future trajectory of where your mentor is going. So oftentimes, right, like you can apply to someone and you're talking about their research from 20 years ago. They're like, I'm not doing that anymore, right? So it's not just about alignment. It's about meeting the moment. And if I'm being completely honest with my own cycle, because I applied in cycles of 10, so 10 applications at a time. The first cycle was all clinical. I thought I wanted to study anxiety and depression because that was all I was exposed to. In my undergrad, it was a clinical program. So I was like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to help people with their stress, I'm going to help people with their anxiety and maybe even depression, and I'm going to be a therapist all day, and that's what I'm going to do. Well, the interesting thing about that is, while I still think a lot of that stuff matters, that doesn't wake me up in the morning. I don't have the questions of what is this facet of unipolar depression and how does it intersect? It's not the thing that keeps me awake at night. I gotta quote Lin-Manuel Miranda here because he is one of the most inspirational leaders and speakers about passion, in my opinion. He said when he was writing Hamilton, it wouldn't leave him alone. It was a thing that kept tapping on his shoulder, that he had to literally write it out of him so that it could live and breathe in the world. And I think when it comes to something as personal and as time-consuming as research, baby, that thing better not be able to leave you alone because it requires so much of you. It can't just be something you're kind of interested in. And so I applied to my next round of 10 after MAP, and I was really on my positive psychology kick. I was like, my signature strength is hope. I want to study hope. This sounds great. I ended up getting flown out to this amazing institution. I won't name the name because, I don't want people thinking things, but, Ivy League, all that stuff. And I was talking to the professor who flew me out. And I realized in that moment, we were talking about two different kinds of hope because she studies hope as a disorder. And people who have hope are delusional because they're disconnected from reality. So I'm sitting there on this interview weekend with all my eggs in this basket. And I'm like, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work for either one of us. And I would later find out that she flew me out because she wanted me to have the chance to talk to other people. See, 10-year-old Jenn is still at work. All I got to do is talk to people and we can make it work. And even though I didn't get admitted to that program, I had a conversation that changed my life because I was telling this preeminent researcher about all my interests and all my experiences. And she said, have you ever thought about studying prejudice or bias reduction? And I looked at her and I said, you know what? I haven't, and I'm going to keep it 100% real with you. I've been taught my entire life that getting the highest form of education would be a way for me to prove that I was smart enough, good enough, not a stereotype, not a cliche. And I don't want to be perceived as the Black person studying Black things because that's the only thing that I can talk about. She looked at me. She said, thanks for your vulnerability, but let me tell you something. If not you, then who? And who better suited than to bring in to white academia a nuanced, research-informed, but also experiential perspective into this work? That one conversation changed my whole life. My next 10 applications were about what I'm studying now.
I have chills. Like, this is so powerful. Sorry, go ahead. I literally have chills.
No.
On my body. Mm-hmm.
I have chills telling the story because this is the kind of stuff people don't always talk about, right? Like they see you, they see the accomplishment, they see when everybody's checking for you, they're like, oh, well, they ignore the journey to get there, right? I've had so many people dismiss my ideas, dismiss my presence, dismiss my thoughts because I hadn't been proven yet or a part of the academic. I didn't even wear my hair natural until I got into a PhD program. Like in my entire life, I would always go back and straighten it. And then I got into that PhD, honey, and I was like, you know what? Y'all gonna get what you get now. And it was this interesting thing. And this is why I love the name of this podcast, because I don't speak from a place of having always gotten it right. I actually speak from a place of living in the when is when for most of my life. But the freedom now I'm getting emotional. The freedom I experience in living in the when is now, it's changed my whole life. Because now I don't have to wait. I don't have to prove. I don't have to petition. All I have to do is be.
And so did this come, Jenn, are we going to attribute this to age? Are we going to attribute this to education? Are we going to attribute this to just development or crystallized intelligence? What are we attributing this to? Because people need to know this turn. You know, when you turn this corner.
You know what? The first thing that comes to mind, I think I actually attribute it to like a spiritual awakening / like breakdown. I'll tell you the moment. So it was actually, I was asking a question at an academic conference. I'll give you more details off the air because this is public, but they were talking about this concept and they were generalizing it to all people, you know, talking about how everybody matters, other people matter, all this stuff. You already know where I'm at. And I raised my hand. I was a graduate at this time, like graduate of the program. And I said, I love this conversation. I think it's really important. And I have some questions. Because when we say everyone matters, we live in a society where inherently there are people who matter more. And more importantly, we like it this way. Like we like living in a hierarchical society. And so how does power interplay and intersect with these constructs of mattering? And I was told by a respected academic that power is not a psychological construct. And that the people who I would think are in power are actually civil servants and they don't have the power that I think. First of all, you're assuming you know what I'm thinking, which is problematic in and of itself. But additionally, it's just factually incorrect. And I didn't have the language then, but now, the late Jim Sendejas, a Black male researcher at Harvard, came up with the construct of SDO, social dominance orientation, which is a proxy for power. And I was so enraged at this assumption. It actually broke me down and broke me open to know that this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And this is exactly what I'm supposed to be studying.
That's so much in that story of that one, that professor, doctor saying that too. And it's so much in your honesty of your reply. Like, that was a lot.
Yeah.
And if you didn't, you probably would. If you weren't that honest, then she probably wouldn't have came back with what she said. And you may not be where you are now.
Exactly. It was something you were saying too about like, quote unquote, soft skills and vulnerability and honesty and all these things. That has now become the infrastructure on which I built my life. Because I think so often we are not transparent because we're afraid of the perception and how we'll be perceived and what that will mean. But someone can't answer the true question if you're not giving them the true question, right? If I were to just say, oh, well, I don't study bias because I haven't really thought about it. It's not really my thing. When I know there's something on the inside of me that lit up when she said that, the truth was I needed to give myself permission. She didn't give me the permission. She just pointed out what has always been true about me. And so I would just encourage anyone who's listening, to remember that, like, we are often our largest blockades to actually pursuing our passions. And we can justify it and say, oh, well, people say this, or what are people going to say, or what are people going to think? But oftentimes what you mean by people is actually just you. What are you going to say? What are you going to think? And you're externalizing it to make it feel bigger. But really, it's like, what am I going to say? What am I going to think? How am I going to feel in my own decisions?
We have 16 minutes left.
Yes.
Give us everything you can give us about your research.
Oh, it would be my
honor. You're measuring and you're correcting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is bananas. Okay, start from scratch.
It's from the beginning. Okay. So I remember I had this idea when I was applying, finally in the right realm, right? That so often when it comes to bias or prejudice or these thoughts that we never want anyone to see about us, how we often are telling people, oh, this is what you scored on an implicit test of your bias. Oh, well, all people have this bias. It's very much me telling you. But I'm like, for something so intimate, what would happen if you told me about your own bias? And often the feedback I got was, no one in their right mind is going to talk to you about their bias. Are you kidding me? In this cancel culture, you have to no, it's never going to happen. And I said, while I understand your hesitancy, I think it's really an empirical question to see if people will talk about it. I don't think it's just one that we can think of. And this is why I say me and my advisor were such a great match, because I pitched this idea to him and he was like, let's do it. And so it started with me reaching out to my network, a lot of lovely Mapsters, and being like, hey, I am starting this new line of research where I invite other people to talk about their racial biases, but not just the bias, but emotion regulation. How do you react when you learn you've been biased? How do you react when someone's told you you've been biased? How do we manage defensiveness? How do we not let our emotions interrupt the very behaviors that you're trying to do, like equality, right? Like if you're over here crying because you're so upset you were biased towards someone, you're actually interrupting your own bias regulation process because you're not emotionally regulated. And I said, but here's the thing. I don't ever ask someone to do something I'm not willing to do. And so before I ask you to share your story with me, I'll first share a story with you. As you know, I was educated in primarily white institutions where I was taught this way is better. And what that ended up downloading on the inside of me were certain instances of anti-Black bias that I had to unearth. And so I said, look, I'm going to start with you by talking about what I've learned about myself in this domain. Then I want you to share with me your anti-Black bias. I had a very similar experience of when you write the email. I was procrastinating so much on this. I can't even tell you. I think it took me a year to actually use the recorded interviews that I got. Talk about procrastination. Because I reached out to a network of maybe 50 people. 25 people were like, yeah, we'd love to. And they agreed to be recorded. They gave me access to all of the videos, language, everything. Forevermore. It was a gold mine of data. And what I knew I needed to do with these videos is turn them into this almost like documentary film that participants would watch before they would share about a time when they were racially biased. It's this really cool thing. Albert Bandura, father in psychology, talks about social modeling, which is this notion that we learn by watching others. And so instead of just asking someone to talk about their bias, let me listen to someone else talk about their bias. But you turn off judgment of that person because you're not saying, now, what do you think of this person? You immediately have to answer the question for yourself. So it's this really cool process of disarming all of those other bells that go off and get in the way so that you can actually be engaged. So for my master's, my third master's, this one in psychology, I defended this project in front of, it's a public defense, so it's very nerve-wracking. And I had a sample size of almost 300 participants. Half went to a control group, half went to this intervention group. And the differences between the control group and the intervention group were astonishing because we were seeing very large effect sizes. I'm talking 0.7, 0.75 differences, which is unheard of in psychology. Normally, small to medium is 0.25 to 0.3. Medium is 0.5. We're seeing large effect sizes and changes between the intervention group and the control on things like bias awareness. Things like a belief that your emotions after you've been biased can actually change, that you're not just stuck there. Changes, my favorite one is in defensiveness. So after they go through this whole experiment, we have these people take an implicit associations test, which tests your timing, your speed to associate good things with white and bad things with Black, just words and then pictures. And the difference in the timing scores gives us a proxy or a measure for your implicit bias. So if you're faster to pair good with white, it means you have a stronger implicit bias for that. So we had them take this test, but here's the trick. We gave them all the same feedback, which was you showed the highest amount of bias. Our participants in the intervention group were less defensive to that feedback. And so it's this really
Wait, so just
cool...
recap. So
yes!
you had two groups, one that received bias training, one that did not.
Yes.
And then you gave them all this touch test.
Videos.
Okay.
Exactly.
They watched other videos.
Exactly.
Then you gave them this touch test. And regardless of where they measured.
Actually scored.
Where they actually scored, you said you were measuring very high on implicit bias, but then the ones that were in the test group received the feedback in a much more productive manner than the ones that were in the control group that just got defensive or to changing behaviors. In how long? I mean, how long
actual
did that take?
behaviors.
Yeah.
I mean, so the interesting thing is, so the whole intervention, people were in and out in 60 minutes, which is like, it could seem like a long time because often a lot of interventions are light touch. But I'm like, 60 minutes. I could watch one episode of, like, it's actually not that long, but to see these differences is just so incredible. So we're in developing study 2 now to see how these effects translate. Would they be defensive around different kinds of feedback about their bias, right? Like, because some people were like, oh, I thought maybe the test might have been false, right? So they might have had other reactions. So now we're trying to see how robust these effects are. But I am just, every part of the project took so much to believe in just attempting it, right? Like, I wasn't even tied to like, oh, this has to work. I was just like, I just want to try it. Like, I just want to give myself a chance to go outside of the box and use things like video, audio, personalized responses, these things that we know is how we engage with the world. And so I, would love if people are more interested in this kind of work. This isn't the only kind of intervention I do. I also have another very immersive emotion granularity intervention that I'm currently running, where people actually like try on clothes of a person with multiple marginalized identities and learn about all their experiences, like from a first person POV. And so I'm really not just here to do science as usual. I'm taking all this stuff that I've gained along the way, whether it's film, documentary, teaching, acting, education, all these things, and really just pouring it into psychological science for questions that matter, like questions around prejudice and race and bias, because we can't say something doesn't work if we haven't thrown everything at it.
I feel like we might need to check in with you and pull out like emotional granularity. I think there's going to be a few terms in this that we'll put in the notes. Can we do that, Jared?
For sure.
We'll get these definitions and put them in the notes. This, our time is up. I know you have someplace to be. This was just the most generous conversation ever, Jenn Beatty. I spoke to, just a little bit of context for the listeners. You were an assistant instructor in one of my classes. I can't remember. And I would always see you in a square. And I knew, and I know I would like side hit you every once in a while and say, I want to talk with you, I want to meet with you. And then we never really could quite make it happen. You were in the middle of things and that program is just so, it's just so consuming.
Yes.
And then, you never left my radar. You were always someone. Then we started kind of talking on LinkedIn and then I was just like, I want to spend some time with you. And we talked for an hour and it really changed sort of the trajectory of that 1 hour. You don't know this, but it really kind of changed the trajectory of what I'm doing here in Hollywood. It helped me understand a lot of, a lot of stuff that it really helped me. We can talk more about it. I actually think we do need a part 2, but we could talk more about it. But that 1 hour conversation we had was so important to me and I really, really appreciate it. You're so generous with your time and your brilliance. But we'll end it here. I'm sorry, listeners.
This was amazing. I am just so honored and just so energized by you and inspired by you. So thank you for the gift of who you are.
Thank you, girl. All right. We're going to keep up on your research and we'll put all Jenn Beatty's info in the story notes so you guys can follow her on LinkedIn and her work. She's doing some really groundbreaking work that people told her she couldn't do, but she did and she's doing and she's making changes. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you,
everyone. Thank you, Capella.
All right, bye. All right, everyone. So what did you think? Is it everything that I promised in my intro? I really enjoyed it. And honestly, some of the things that she talked about, especially like how childhood experiences can shape our narratives. And then what also, I always like to take any opportunity to talk about like narratives, because we have a narrative for ourselves, then we have a narrative for someone else, and then that someone else has a narrative for us, and like what is true, what is correct. I got a little vulnerable in this because I sort of grew up with my own narrative about my intelligence, and Jenn, she understood where I was coming from, and she shared some stuff, and it was just some poignant moments for me. And honestly, like, I'm just like these last 6 months getting over this narrative that I've been telling myself my whole life. And then thank you to our podcast producer, Jared Redding, who went ahead and answered that question of where Idaho is. He said it's on the West Coast, and it's a really funny shaped state that is bordered by, I think he said 7 other states, and he guaranteed us if we were to look at a map, we could figure that out. So that's where Idaho is, and I'm going to go there because I heard it's very beautiful. I love her work on bias, but I especially love her just absolute inability to give up in like this amazing, relentless search to find what she wanted to do. Started with clinical, and then she went into studies of hope, and then ended up studies around implicit bias. And it's a better world because of it. Keep doing your thing, Jenn. You guys can get a hold of her through LinkedIn. We'll put her stuff in the show notes, but follow us and let's have conversation. We can find it's When Is Now Podcast, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, and share it, like it, rate it, review it, subscribe to it, and let's talk about it. And then tell your friends. And thank you for Jared Redding for telling us where Idaho is, and for being an awesome podcast producer. And thank you for the music, Contavious Jones. All right, everyone. I'll see you next time.